Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Manifest. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. There are so many moving pieces in this episode, so let's just start off with, Michaela's situation. So obviously she's trying to get to talking to Pete, but Pete doesn't want to talk to her. He just wants to talk to Angelina. It's like, oh, well, yeah, because she was scared of you. And it's like, no, she wasn't scared. She was brave. And just like, I'm going to go back to my cell. And it's like, okay, so that kind of goes nowhere. But then she starts having the heart beating calling again. And that being, representing Evie. So she goes to check on Evie's parents. And it turns out Evie's dad had died. And so now Evie's mom is kind of left alone with no one to kind of take care of her. And so, Jarrett shows up and he brings Zeke as well. Obviously, Evelyn was, she remembers Jarrett and Michaela together. So it's like, oh, look at you, you're so handsome in a suit and everything. So it's like, and the whole awkward thing of yeah, you two, I knew you two get married. It's like, oh, look at this diamond ring. It's like, oh, it's actually white sapphire. It's like, oh, I knew Jarrett pick out a good one. And he's like, not awkward. But obviously they can't do much for her in the sense that well, she doesn't have anyone left to, take care of her, so it is a situation now that they got to find, it's kind of set up to be an assisted living situation. Even going through some DVDs, it ended up being one of Michaela and Evie when they were younger, as little kids. But Zeke ended up finding another one that was left from Glenn being hey, I've set up this whole getting my wife into an assisted living situation. This house, we want it to be yours. You coming back into our lives, it was good. It was great for us. It was, more than we could have ever expected. It's we got a piece of Evie back when you came back into our lives, and that we can never basically not be grateful enough. Can never be grateful enough for that, and so it's holy crap, he just gave us a house. And so, which initially Michaela doesn't want to move in there because it's this is Evie's home. This is all she's ever really known for the past 40 years. And obviously they're trying to pack her stuff up. I say Evie, I think I meant her mom. Because her mom's name's Evelyn. I think I just keep missing that in my head. And maybe that's why I'm crossing that over in my head. But every time, it's her mom, Evie's mom kind of starts getting confused because Zeke talks about the fact is he's experienced dementia. I think in his grandmother, or I believe it was one of his grandparents, he had talked about it. So he was trying to do what he could to help. But obviously it's that thing of Michaela feeling like she can't do anything. She wants to help, but it's also Evie's mom wants Evie. She wants Glenn, and it's I don't, where are they? No, I'm not going anywhere. Where are they? And she's obviously getting scared and getting frustrated. But then something happens where we see something happen to Zeke, and he's able to talk to her, calm her down, and it's getting her to breathe in, breathe out, and it's what keeps you calm? What's your comfort? And then it's a necklace that says Brave. Evie had made it. And even Michaela be how did you do that? He's I don't know, I just had a feeling. And I'm once again, it's did Zeke level up or something? What's going on there? It's almost he's empathic now. I guess maybe the calling, rather than just being the visions, it's maybe it's supposed to be the vision, the callings initially are supposed to be a guide, and that eventually your reward, kind of your upgrade is, it becomes almost second nature to you now. Rather than it just being this thing that kind of gets thrust upon you, it's just kind of in the moments it kind of kicks in. Either Zeke has to learn a little bit more control over it, or it's just because it doesn't seem as intrusive as a calling, because it's just hits you all at once. But this, it was just you see this sonic effect in the air around him, and it's just it was just it wasn't like how Evie, the whole heartbeat hits Michaela the entire episode, that being the calling. It doesn't manifest itself like that. So that's why I'm wondering there's something there. Like, Zeke's had this thing, you know, like, of him just knowing stuff that is like, it's like, you're not having a callings, but you're still having callings. Because even he's the one that found the DVD that Glenn had left Michaela as a message of like, yeah, if I'm gone, that means the house is yours. So like, it's something there. I'm curious like what that is, whether that is what that's supposed to be. Like, it's supposed to be like, no, like these are supposed to come like second natures. They're becoming like a new part of you now, and then will, you know, eventually maybe every passenger will get to that point. Because there is another element to this episode. Obviously, like Olive and I'll circle back to that really quickly, but I want to connect these dots. Is Olive and Angelina were looking into some stuff that TJ had sent over, and that dude was kind of looking through them. It was about Mott, who, you know, the whole weathering feather weighing your soul on scales of judgment. And obviously, it's like usually it's an ostrich feather, but obviously in this depiction, it's a peacock feather. And Angelina and Olive start kind of wondering, like, obviously it's about, what if that's what coming back is about? Your second chance is about being judged. And, like, maybe that's what the death date is and stuff like that. It's giving you time to, like, balance the scales, I guess? Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I mean, we definitely, it seems like that might be what are the names? Jace, Pete, and so like maybe that's what their whole thing is about, you know? Because remember, Home Dude from season 1 who didn't, he was the bad guy, and he didn't tip the scales and ended up dying, drowning, you know, again. So life kind of got him back for being a dick. But I think that's what it's supposed to represent, like the balancing scales. And I think it's like when you kind of maybe sacrificing himself to save Cal. Maybe that's what Zeke did, and he kind of balanced the scales more in his favor, and that freedom of the death day, but it, you know, unlocked more potential. I don't know. I wonder, like, that's why I'm wondering, like, if Zeke's situation is something that can happen to everyone, because it seems like he's the first one of the, like, I mean, to be fair, also, his circumstances are different. He wasn't a passenger. His situation is a little different. His death date was on a smaller time scale than everyone, because everyone else has, like, you know, that 5-year return period, well, 5.5-year return period or whatever. Like, Zeke only had, like, a year, so his circumstances are different, so it begs a question, you know? So maybe that's, you know, the whole thing of, like, everyone has to do good, you know, do a certain amount of kind of good. It's kind of like the Good Place, where you need, like, a certain amount of points to get into the good place. Like, maybe it's kind of a similar thing in that regard. I don't know. That was kind of where my mind went when they kind of brought up the whole, like, being judged situation. I was like, oh, that's interesting to think about if that's the case. So maybe that's what, you know, this is all potentially leading to. So, but circling back to Michaela and Zeke, obviously they were getting Evie's mom ready to leave, but it's Beverly. I just thought about it. I kept saying Evelyn. It's Beverly, isn't it? I think so. I feel so stupid. Because I kept being like, I knew Evelyn sounded wrong, because I was like, her name isn't, like, because I was thinking, like, maybe that's why, like, we're Evie, you know, but I was like, no, and I was like, I mean, that might have been, like, Evie's name was Evelyn, but I was like, her mom's name's Beverly. Like, I'm not gonna go back to try and correct that. Like, it's just gonna stay in. But once again, I'm terrible with names sometimes. So, but Beverly, if I'm not mistaken. Once again, I could be wrong, and I'm sounding extra stupid right now. That's fine. I sound stupid all the time. But Michaela, like, the heartbeat calling Kim again. She's like, you know what? No. I'm not gonna have Beverly leave, because, like, this is our home. It's like, me and Zeke will find a way. And it's like, Zeke's like, she's going to need, like, 24/7 assistant living. And it's like, we'll live here with her. We'll hire someone. We'll make this work, you know? And it's like, and, you know, obviously Zeke is willing to, you know, it's like, hey, if that's what you want to do, like, let's do it, you know? So, because I think for her, it's just like, she, especially considering, like, Beverly doesn't have anyone left in this world, like, because it's like, this is what I want, and this is what Evie and, you know, and Glenn would want, you know? So I think this, well, more so like Evie, because it's like the kind of, because Glenn, you know, didn't think there was anyone probably left in the world, and he didn't want to kind of probably, you know, feel like he was pushing Beverly on anyone. But I think it's going to definitely be an interesting dynamic to see them balancing everything, you know. Michaela balancing work, the callings, being there for Beverly, just starting their own life. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces at play here. There's also Angelina visiting Pete, where it's like, Michaela saved me, and she's like, I think I'm supposed to save you, you know, and he's like, yeah, I think he gets his feeling. He's like, I heard this voice in my head say, go to her. And it's like, I think I'm supposed to be with you too. So it's like, maybe there's, you know, maybe Angelina's supposed to be his path to Pete's path for redemption. Because amongst them, the trio, he is the one that was the most, it seemed, reluctant to do a lot of stuff that they did. So maybe back then he had a crush on her, and you know, nothing came about it. But especially because like Angelina had brought up earlier, like, oh yeah, she's asking like Olive about boyfriends and stuff like that, because it's like, she's like, yeah, according to our birth certificate. I was like, according to your, I was like, oh right, because you're technically, you're 30, but technically you're like 25, because you weren't there for 5 years or so. So understandable when she was like, according to my birth certificate, I'm like 30, you know. So it's like, for her, like, that seemed like that was something kind of foreshadowing. When we see, like, I don't know if it'll be like a necessarily her and Pete thing, but there's definitely something on that lane of, like, obviously her playing some role in. And I'm curious, like I said, I'm curious with their past. Like, other that photo, did they actually have any interactions back then? Like, it is interesting how life comes full circle in many different regards. That, like, here you are years ago as kids, and like, here you are now, you know, and just how life is interesting in that regard. Another interesting element to this episode was Ben getting a calling. Obviously, him being frustrated by the fact is that he needs to do something, because like his, you know, Grace, Eden, and Cal are away from him, so he just needs to do something to kind of keep himself busy. But also, like, the quicker he figures everything out, the kind of quicker he can get his family back and everything. But he ends up having a calling, and ended up leading him to a dude named Egan, fellow passenger. And Egan's an interesting dude because he has like a photographic memory. So he's been dealing with the callings on his own. He just decided, like, I'm not much of a group activity dude, but he's playing all these chess matches at once. And so they start piecing stuff together. Egan sees certain things, but obviously Ben sees other details that he doesn't. And that begs the question, like, well, maybe it is a thing of we're meant to work together, so maybe that's why I see some things and you see others, you know? But they ended up piecing it ultimately all together, and they ended up figuring out, oh, it's a museum. And they end up, you know, finding a boy named Caleb, because initially they go to the wrong room, but they were like, right, reflection, flipped upside down, not 601, 109. And they find Caleb knocked out because there was like a gas leak or something. It starts being a rumbling in the building. And they're trying to get Caleb out. But Egan's like, don't worry, I'm going to go take care of the pipes and stuff like that. Luckily, Ben was able to get Caleb out of there. But the place is catching on fire and everything. Very close call. But then Egan shows up. He's like, oh, good to see you. And he's like, Ben's like, oh, I thought you were... He's like, yeah, the pipes... I turn back around. Oh, the cops are showing. Yeah, so you take care of that. Yeah, I don't want to, you know, have to deal with too many questions from New York's finest. So I was like, that's super shady that you just want to like up and bounce like that. Well, we find out later on, like, especially Ben was like, yeah, I can't find my card or anything. It's like, right, you did hand it to him so he can unlock the door, and it's like, your bag's missing too. I was like, oh, the bastard stole from you. And then I start thinking, like, did that bastard go back and say, like, oh, I'm dealing with the pipes, but in actuality I'm robbing this place or some shit like that? Oh, it turns out he was. I was like, oh, that's kind of scummy of you, but I guess it's a thing of, you do what you got to do to survive. Like, I'm sure, like, the games he plays, like, I guess he's kind of like a, God, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess a scammer is kind of, not necessarily the word I'm looking for. Con artist, maybe, I mean, it's kind of one and the same, but I'm like, I guess he's more of a con artist. Maybe that's kind of his whole shtick. But I thought it was interesting because Ben's like, yeah, like, he's good with the, he was saying that, like, Egan's really good with the callings, but he was like, but I don't trust him. I wouldn't be the first person connected to the callings he didn't trust. But was also, I mean, to be fair, with this balancing the scales, definitely not working in Egan's favor at this rate if he's kind of doing shady stuff like that. So it might be a thing in the end of like, I need to do good to kind of balance the scales more in my favor, which is, interesting because a piece of like the whole thing Olive was looking at in this episode with Angelina, like they're missing like the bottom like left corner, and it's like, oh, we need this entire thing to kind of potentially get a full scope and picture and understanding of how to deal with the death date and everything. And he ended up throwing away Ben's bag along with a piece, because it was like, oh, here's a piece of trash or whatever in it, but it ended up being said piece, and he just put it in Ben's bag, threw it in the trash or light. So either it's something, a calling or whatever is going to lead Egan back to that, or Ben to that, or Ben to Egan, and that's eventually going to lead to that. But somehow in some shape or form that bag is going to find its way back, some coincidental way, whether it's like some other passenger or something else related tied into this will make it find its way back to Ben, and at the end of the day, maybe, I don't know. I guess it's also supposed to show like if I guess it kind of worked out in the end that if Egan hadn't stolen that stuff, that piece probably could have been lost to the fire. I mean, maybe if he'd actually done what he was supposed to, then maybe he could. I mean, maybe that also speaks volumes of like why Ben saw Caleb but Egan didn't, just because he kind of doesn't see people. Maybe he just sees marks. Maybe it's just kind of like hey, everyone's out for themselves, you die or survive type of situation. So, I mean, maybe that's what that's supposed to imply. So, once again, we already got like 3 rogue people out there with the callings and everything. So it's like, what Egan will ultimately do with it. Well, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Well, not just what he'll do with it, what he's done with it, because he's been dealing with it this entire time as well for months. So there's that. Another side of things, we've got Vance being questioned for everything, because obviously they're wondering if, it's like, hey, you faked your death for like 18 months. It's like, so where were you? It's like, I was, it's like, like I was in New York. It's like the most populated place. He's like, yeah, And it's like, oh, is this over with? Because I got to go home dinner. My wife's expecting me for supper. It's like, yeah, there's no guarantee you're going home. Because they're questioning him, because they're like, oh, you're treasonous, because it's like, you faked your death. In which he was even like, yeah, faking your death's technically not illegal. But they're kind of grilling him and stuff like that. What Vance was kind of tired of. It's like, I dedicated so much of my life to this agency. You literally put my ultimate life in danger when you basically gave me the job to look into the 828. I did. It nearly almost got me killed, and look where we are right now. Eventually even getting pissed, because it's like, I got assigned the job, and then, the major, I'm trying to, in retrospect, did I call her the general? I'm sitting here thinking about it. I think I've called her the general in other things. Have I? Or have I always called her the major? I feel like maybe the past 2 episodes or something I called her the general. I don't think I called her the major. Did I? I don't know, because I definitely haven't been calling her by the name of Catherine. But I'm like, I'm sitting here thinking that now I'm saying the major out loud. I was like, I don't think I've been calling her the major. I think I've been calling her the general for like whatever reason. It's like, I hope I wasn't making that mistake during season 2. I probably could have been. Like, once again, I'm an idiot. I don't pay attention to like half the words that come out my damn mouth. God, I'm such an idiot. I just thought about that, and it's like, now it's making me question myself. I probably have been calling her the general, like, for the past, like, 2 episodes, like, reviews of this season. Once again, I hope I didn't do it a lot in season 2, but there's a strong possibility, excuse me. Whatever the case may be, the major, it's like, so if you want to put me in a position where she might come after me, and it's like, well, the major's body was found in New Orleans, which also it's like, oh, so no coming back for her, so it's not like a thing of like, because I was wondering about that, and it wasn't, once again, I should have went back and rewatched season 2, but I didn't, sadly. Apparently somebody told Vance, and I was like, right, I didn't remember that, so that's what kept going through my mind. I was like, does Vance know? And it's like, oh. So, and I love Vance being like, oh, really? And he threw that out there just to probably find out, because, like, he didn't want them to know that he knew about the major being dead. It's like, oh, the major's dead. I was like, oh, I guess I do have nothing to worry about. But it's like, he still wanted nothing to do with them. I'm wondering, was he actually playing hardball because he knew that they knew a lot more than they were letting on? I guess he just wasn't expecting. So I'm assuming I caught glimpses of it just because of the trailer, and I think it actually is a preview. It's actually the preview for the next episode that actually has popped up. But I think it's Vance eventually shows Sanvi and Ben, but I think the government's basically been putting the real 828 back together, or either that or the fake 828. The 828 that they came back on and exploded, maybe they've been piecing that back together this entire time. Because Powell is telling Vance, like, yeah, you thought we were kind of deep into 828 2 years ago? We on a whole nother level now, my friend. You know, so that's a definitely interesting development. Like I said, I don't know whether it's a thing of like, oh, he was just playing coy so he could find out what they know, or was it just a thing of like, nah, seriously, I am done with this. I am interested in this, you know, mystery, because it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people that are in need of help and are in danger, and he knows, you know, 828 and stuff like that. But it's also interesting because it's like, yeah, you helped cover up the general. I did it. I just, the major. That confirms it. I definitely be calling her the general. The fact is, I slipped up right then and there. It's proof enough for me. Jesus. Oh, that's gonna. It's one of those like little idiosyncrasies that I'm like, oh, you've been fucking up the entire time, and it's gonna haunt you forever. I'm the type of person that's always gonna hold that against myself. It's like, oh, remember, instead of calling her the major, you're calling her the general the entire time, you idiot. Oh God, I feel so stupid. It's an easy mistake to make, but it's just like, no, it's actually not, considering they just tell you over and over again, oh, major. I'm messing up a lot during this recording. That's fantastic. Early morning recordings, I love them. Nevertheless, I literally lost my train of thought because I went on that whole damn tangent. Right, regardless of all that, speaking of the major, is actually interesting too, because obviously Jarrett found out from Ben and Michaela of like, oh, so Catherine's the major. So, interesting. Can't be a coincidence her daughter rolls up asking for Michaela to look for her mom. Oh yeah, well, someone else I should talk to? Yeah, talk to Sanvi. The major was pretending to be her therapist and everything, and Jarrett comes and confronts Sanvi. Sanvi's like, oh, what? I didn't know she had any kids. And it's like, you know, that's eating away at her guilt, which she's like texting Vance, which to be fair, Vance is kind of getting grilled by the NSA, so he didn't really have time to get back to Sam, because I'm sure they're also watching his every move. So also going to have to be a little shh. It's like probably a thing of, well, they found her body in New Orleans now, so you don't have to worry about it. But it's now a guilt thing of like, because eventually she's probably going to end up crossing paths with Sanvi. Sanvi's probably going to end up eventually crossing paths with the major's daughter, so it's probably going to be, I mean, there might be some connection or something in that regard, because Jared at the end is explaining to the major's daughter about like what she was up to, but it's like, regardless of what she did, my mom is still my mom. So it's a thing of like, yeah, she might have been a terrible person, but she doesn't deserve to die. That's still my mom, you know? I mean, I'm sure other people would make arguments like, I don't know about that, you know, about whether, you know, what she deserves and what she doesn't, you know. So, once again, interesting, like, element of, like, you know, tipping up the balance in the scales, weighing judgments of the soul and stuff like that. So, once again, I didn't remember the whole Vance thing, so part of me was wondering, like, could she have potentially come back? But it's like, well, they found her dead body, so it's like, that's a big no. So, we'll see kind of how things turn out on that front, and what Vance's conversations with Sanvi is going to be like, especially because, like, no one else knows the truth. So we'll see on that front. An interesting thing too is, obviously, you still haven't told Tariq about, oh yeah, all the stuff that Cal sees, because Cal ended up seeing the peacock, which I guess I might have been seeing it wrong, but it looked like the peacock's tails were all like, a lot of them seemed like, not as, I guess maybe it was just a reflection, but they weren't as bright. They seemed withered, like the color was drained from them, like they were dying. Like, it only seemed like some were like bright and colorful. But yeah, Cal was like, yeah, I saw a peacock. He's like, oh, that was a flamingo, bro. He's like, I know the difference between a flamingo. I know what a peacock is. It's like, oh, well then I've never seen a peacock. Or Tariq's kind of being an asshole about it, and even Grace is like, okay, got my son so slack. It's like, yeah, well, your boy needs to learn not to tell, you know, white lies are just as bad. Because I guess it's like, oh, once you start telling white lies, then you go down a whole lane. And she's like, oh, you calling my son a liar? Like, it's like, whoa, and it turns into an argument. Because there's still bad blood there. They hadn't really dealt with anything. But for him, it's like, oh, he's like, and there you go again making that remark of your family. He's like, what does that make us? It's like, you weren't here when Dad was sick. I was the one, having to carry him and be there when he was coughing up blood, and this, and it's just like making her feel bad. And it turns out that little thing that Olive, the treasure hunt thing that Olive and Cal do, actually is something that Tariq's dad taught him and Grace, and she kind of ended up passing it on to her kids. But it was a thing of, I loved him too, and I'm sorry I wasn't here for not just him, but also for you, because Tariq had to carry that burden alone. Like, it's one thing that have to. And in the moment he was going off about it, I was like, you do know her son was sick, right? So she knows exactly what it's like to watch someone you care about, but it's like, oh, he didn't know. Because she's like, yeah, the reason why I didn't show up because Cal, got diagnosed with leukemia. It's like, well, wait, what? Yeah. It's like, is he good? And it's like, yeah, he's been in remission for a year. And, Tariq's like, I wish I'd been there for you. And it's like, but at the very least, we're here for each other now. So I figured that this would be a part of the process of them kind of repairing their relationship. So I figured that kind of play a role in things. But another angle to this is, you had, Cal playing with the feather, and he's saying the thing over and over again, and then the trio is getting hit by it because it's almost like this commanding voice. And obviously, I think, once again, is it Jace, the head honcho of the the meth heads or whatever? Once again, it still blows my mind that that's just kind of like their titling. I'm like, yeah, they're the meth heads. I mean, yeah, they're the meth dudes, but it's just still interesting that like they just get lumped as the meth heads. I don't know why that just kind of catches me off guard from time to time. But he's just scrawling out the eyes of like Michaela, Ben, and Cal because he's dead set on revenge. The others, once again, aren't as like hell bent on that. Which, interestingly enough, Caleb, the kid Ben ended up saving, ends up being the brother of one of said meth heads. The 828 mystery continuing to work in very, very mysterious ways. So that was kind of an interesting event because I didn't know where that was going to go, and I was like, okay, and it's like your brother, and I was like, oh, is it going to be someone we know? It's like, oh, it is someone we know. It's like, that's interesting. So Ben was that close without realizing it. Now, probably when information gets conveyed, it's like, wait, the dude who saved my brother is the dude whose kid we tried to kidnap, and it's like, yikes, like that's going to be some issues. But this might be a thing of him, that might be his, it's like, he saved my little brother, and like this might be my chance to make things right. So Pete and him might be the ones that kind of end up kind of trying to tip the scales and the balance more in their way. Home dude might, he might be the harder calls to kind of swerve back onto the right path. Because it just seems like, because was it like last episode, they were just kind of like, yeah, let's just go. Let's not do this. He's like, nah, gotta, it's like, oh, worked here, so let's go get some money or something. It's like, he's the one that's like, yeah, let's go commit some crimes. They're like, really, dude, you gonna like pull a knife out broad day? Like, come on, dude, let's go. We have a second chance in life. Like, he's the one that just, and it seemed like it resonated with him, but like I said, he's the one that's kind of more like, let's do more evil. Let's do evil. Yeah, evil's cool. I don't know what's jacked up in his life that kind of made him decide, because everyone else is more like, no, let's not. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, which the next episode's tonight. At the time you're recording this, just because I'm that far behind on a lot of stuff. So once again, still in the process of catching up. So this should go up today. Not sure about the time frames because I still got to obviously edit, export, and upload everything. So, but it should go up today before too long. So we'll see. But like I said, I'm excited for tonight's episode to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.